section 8.6 is an extension of what we did in 8.5, so we're still going to factor. The difference is that we no longer have a 1 in front, so you'll have a number in front that you will need to deal with. So my steps are still going to be the same. I look for a greatest common factor. So if 5, 11, and 2, my greatest common factor would be 1, so I wouldn't have to do anything with that, okay? Then I'm still going to slide, so I multiply 5 with 2 and do my sum and product puzzle. So I got 10 on the top, my middle term was 11, so I do factors of 10. So 1 and 10, 2 and 5. That set that adds or subtracts to 11 is 1 and 10. So then I split it up. I get 5x squared plus 1x plus 10x plus 2. I have to group my first two together and do a GCF and group the second two. The first two I would pull out an x from each of them. So when I divide this by x, I get 5x. When I divide this by x, I get 1. Then on this one, my greatest common factor is 2. So I divide this by 2, I got 5x. Divide that by 2, I get 1. Then I still am going to pull the stuff that's in the parentheses. It should be the same. So I pull that down there as its own factor. The two GCFs come together as its own factor. So this should be the same process as what you saw before. Let's take a look at another one. I look at my greatest common factor. So I look at 3, 4, negative 15. My greatest common factor would still be 1, so I wouldn't have to divide anything. I slide over my 3 and negative 15 and do my sum and product puzzle. So I got negative 45 for when I slid. My middle term is 4, so I list all the factors of 45. So I have 1 and 45, 3 and 15, 5 and 9. So my set that subtracts to 4 is 5 and 9. And then I do my signs. Bigger number needs to be positive, smaller number needs to be negative. Then I split it up. So I have 3x squared minus 5x plus 9x minus 15. Find my greatest common factor of the first two. So I would factor out just an x or 1x if you want to call it. And so I'd be left with 3x minus 5 on the inside. And then I'm going to find the greatest common factor of my second grouping, which would be 3. Divide both of them by 3, and I would be left with 3x minus 5. Pull my greatest common factors together, so I have x plus 3, and then the stuff in the parentheses is the same, so it gets listed once. So notice all of that is still the same as what you did before. Now looking at something where it might be just a little different. So looking at this polynomial, my greatest common factor now, when I look for factors of those numbers, I can divide all of those by 3. So the first thing I have to do is divide all of those by 3. Now what we're going to do is, we're still going to do the same steps as before. And that GCF that we had, we're going to put that down there at the beginning. So it doesn't just disappear, it still needs to be at the beginning. Okay? So I multiply my 6 and 4 after I slide and did my sum and product. I get negative 3 and negative 8 after I did my sign rules. So then I split it up just like before. But again, my GCF, I'm just going to drop down here to the 3 and then do my sets of parentheses so that I don't forget about it. Okay? Now I'm going to do my GCF of the grouping. So my first grouping, I would do 3 and x. So I divide by 3x, I get 2x. Divide by 3x, I get 1. This set over here, my GCF is 4, but notice that you have this negative on that first term. So you have to pull out a negative 4 when you get ready to start. So then when I divide by negative 4, I get positive 2x and then a negative 1. 2x minus 1 goes in one set, and then 3x minus 4 comes from your two GCFs. Now I want you to pause the video and see if you can do the last question. On the last question, you should have found a greatest common factor of 4. So that means I'm dividing all of these by 4 and I'm left with this. So this 4 is just going to drop down into my answer, and I can go ahead and do my two sets of parentheses to leave them blank for now. So then I'm just dealing with this inside stuff. I slide my 2 over and I had negative 10. Middle term was negative 9, so I used 1 and negative 10 after my sign rules. I split it up, did my grouping here. My greatest common factor was x, so I had 2x plus 1. Find my greatest common factor here. It would be 5. Notice this one is negative, so again, I have to pull that negative out with it, so it's negative 5. So then I divide both of them by negative 5. I get 2x plus 1. The stuff in parentheses matches, so I can put that in one set of parentheses. My GCFs that I pulled will go in its first set of parentheses, and then that would be my final answer. So on this particular one, just notice that it's the same thing as 8.5, but there are some questions where it tells you to factor completely, and that's your hint where you're going to use a greatest common factor.